when a person is saying to his children or his grandchildren, these are the stories that make you who you are. This is in your family line. This is in your blood. This is part of your DNA and your makeup. It's powerful because their story is not disconnected from the following generations. It's part of who they are.
Welcome to the Navigating Abundance podcast. Our goal is to encourage you to pursue your total family wealth potential through insightful conversation with experts and thought leaders in their fields. But first, some obligatory disclosures. Navigating Abundance podcasts do not represent investment, legal, or tax advice. Any opinion expressed in Navigating Abundance podcast is solely those of Christopher Tanke and his guests and are based upon information believed to be reliable but not guaranteed. Podcasts are produced for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered an endorsement of the guest or the views that they hold. Information shared may not be appropriate for your personal situation. Consult a qualified advisor for guidance. Investment advisory services are offered through Strategic Financial Group, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Navigating Abundance is a trademark of Strategic Financial Group, LLC. And now here's your host, Chris Tanke.
Welcome back to Navigating Abundance. I'm Chris Tanke, and today I'm delighted to have with us John Moessner of film Indelible. And you're really going to enjoy this episode. John, we're just delighted for you to be with us and for sharing some of your time with us.
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Now, 3 weeks ago, we had no idea who John Moessner and Film Indelible was. But we went to the Purposeful Planning Institute rendezvous, which we've shared with you through some of our podcasts and website content. We went there for the purpose of basically introducing Navigating Abundance to a group of practitioners who specifically swim in the ponds of total family wealth management and development, family office type space things. And we got a booth and we had our podcast up and we unveiled some materials that we've created, some deliverables you can get on our website, which would be the essential file and the essential quiz for you to take to kind of see where you stand in total family wealth pursuits. And we had tremendous feedback, but even though that was the primary reason for us to go, to get that kind of feedback, the secondary supporting reason was as expected, as neat as we thought it would be, and that is to meet people, practitioners, who we could network with or learn from or be able to put in our Rolodex for sourcing out to. And one of those folks was John. And we met, I don't know, in the lunch line, or I don't know where and who met you first, because we all divided and conquered and just had a great time with all these people. But John does something really, really neat, and something that we have supported both with podcasts specifically and on our website, the value of passing along legacy through either print or media. So the message will outlive you. 100 years from now or 200 years from now, if somebody gets their hands on it, you can still be speaking to them, and how valuable that is in the transformation of your families for generations. And that is John's space exactly. So we are really excited to pick your brain. And I want to start, John, by asking, how did Film Indelible begin? How did you begin to launch this kind of service?
Well, I got into media production, doing marketing and branding films for companies. And as a natural result of doing these types of films, I was in touch a lot with business owners, industry leaders, venture capitalists, people who had often invested sometimes their entire life into an idea, into a company. And as a result, I got to have close proximity to a number of really interesting people who have, started some beautiful things and beautiful ideas from the ground up. And I've worked with brands. I kind of got niched into the luxury brand early on in my career. Enjoyed getting to tell the story of a company and I'm going to backtrack it just a tiny bit. When I first got into creative work, it was actually on the music side, music production. And I know that doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about today. But I just assumed that I would, with my love for music, and I'm a musician, that I would really find my sweet spot in doing music videos. And I did a number of music videos. And to be honest, it was not my sweet spot. I mean, I enjoyed it, but when I got the opportunity to tell the story of a startup company, something inside of me was just like, this is far more authentic to me. It's far more genuine. The story here, I'm not fabricating a story to try to make somebody come off. I was capturing a story that was already there. And so often there was a really beautiful heartbeat behind the purpose of that brand or that company. And so I fell in love with getting to tell the story of business owners. And sometimes I was telling the story of how they started it. Sometimes I'm telling the story of an idea. But it just came so naturally to me to tell their story, and I found it really fascinating. And that led to, I had a number of my clients, encourage me to go into the legacy part of storytelling. And I was already kind of doing that peripherally, but this is me kind of I ignored that prompting for a few years. And then I had a legacy piece just fall in my lap. I was contacted by a family office, and I was told to bid on a job that was different than anything I had done before, but not entirely foreign to me. And it was a project that was a 2-year project, and I fell in love with it. And I have intentionally started pursuing legacy work because it's very gratifying, it's very satisfying. There's something in capturing the essence and values of a person who's wanting to leave something beyond all the assets that they've acquired, but something more. And when I have been in the room and that's being communicated, that's an honor. That's a real privilege to get to witness somebody passing on their stories of what made them, the struggles of what made them, the values that came about as a result of how they handled situations. All those things they're precious, sacred. And that passing on that type of legacy, that's not something that's assumed. It's something that has to be intentionally stewarded and communicated. And so
And I
that's part
love,
of what I do.
yeah, and I love on your website, I caught this little phrase. I said, boy, I got to cob that, where you said legacy is not accidental, legacy is intentional. And, that's working with, an organization such as yourself. That's an intentional decision. We want to produce something, but we also want it to be genuine, clear, and impactful, and we want it to outlive us. That's an intentional act, and I really love that. Connor, I'm going to have you put up, what does your total family wealth consist of now? And I just want to just take the mic for a second, and then I'm going to hand it right back to you, John. But basically, John's preaching our sermon. What does your total family wealth consist of? There are 3 areas of wealth that you have: your ledger wealth, your financial capital; your logistic wealth, your functional capital; and finally, your legacy wealth, your family capital. And all 3 are very important. I think that so often, though, our legacy wealth, our family capital, those things are, maybe because they're a little more difficult to define and accomplish holistically, we tend to not maybe give enough attention to that as we should. And, 100 years from now, basically it's your family capital that really is all that will matter to your legacy. Family capital is your family relationships, your family ethos, your family wellness, your family practice, your family philanthropy. We want to encourage that for you to pursue all 5 of those areas. Under family ethos, that's what we're talking about today, your family spirit, an appreciation, as John said, for your history, your story, your values, your traditions. And how do we do that with maximum impact? And there are a variety of ways to do that. And one, of course, is through media. So this is, man, when we met you, John, we're saying, we got to have this guy in a podcast. We just love what you're doing. Yeah.
That's great. Very encouraging.
So can you talk about maybe some of the values, the impact of utilizing media for communicating a message that is basically going to outlive you? What are some things that you have seen, if you can think of any experiences or any outcomes of talking with folks about this. Does it take a lot of even convincing to cast the vision, saying, "Hey, here's what you guys could do"? How do people respond to this? How do they dive into it?
Well, sometimes, I mean, it's an investment to it's this is not a quick process, sit down, shoot an interview, and then just turn a video around. There's a lot of time and research that's needed. You're handling the most important parts of a person's life, and it's not something you can just rush into. So there's a lot of research, there's a lot of discovery that is needed. Some people see the value of it and recognize that there's, it's worth investing in, especially if you have the means to properly capture it. What this ends up being is often more valuable than things that you can put a price tag on.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I had one of my clients, a VC up in New York, was saying, for years, John, you've got to get into legacy work. You would do so well telling people stories, because I really care about the story and I care about what's the heartbeat in the story. And nobody is just one story. Everybody is a conglomeration of so many different experiences and events and decisions, an amalgamation of wisdom and other people pouring into them, and honestly a lot of mistakes that they've made. And those mistakes are critical to passing on, because those are the things that actually made that person who that person is.
Exactly right. And yeah, that's the courageous part of this. I mean, complete honesty. If you really want people to understand and appreciate either the journey or lessons learned or God's grace where you messed it up or whatever the case might be, man, that is a powerful thing to say. Well, don't ever do this. Let me tell you, as how you sacrifice and succeeded, also how you sacrifice and maybe even failed is a fabulous lesson.
When a person is saying to his children or his grandchildren, these are the stories that make you who you are. This is in your family line. This is in your blood. This is part of your DNA and your makeup. It's powerful because their story is not disconnected from the following generations. It's part of who they are. And some people don't know why they are a certain way. And to have somebody unmask and unearth, these are your roots. This is where you came from. Again, it's sacred work and it can't be rushed. So it takes time. And because of that, it is involved. And because of that, it is an investment. And not everybody sees the value in the investment. But some people, you don't even have to sell them because they already know. I had a very special project where I was actually hired. I was hired by the children of a man who was about to turn 90, and he was considered the G2 of the family business, the second generation, and his father started this company. The children asked if I would sit in their father's living room surrounded by a dozen of his grandchildren and capture them, peppering him with questions about his life. It was such a powerful, powerful moment. And it lasted, and we interviewed him for 6 hours, 3 2-hour sessions.
Wow.
And it was powerful. The first 2 hour session, the kids, I say kids, they were in their 20s and 30s. And this is the G4 generation.
Mm-hmm.
They peppered him with questions about their great grandmother and grandfather, and then how did you meet grandmother? And stories he told were they made them laugh, it made them cry. He talked about taking care of his wife who had Alzheimer's, and he vowed he would never put her in a nursing home. At times, I felt like I shouldn't be in the room because this should just be between him and them. But it was so beautiful. And then the next 2 hours, they peppered him with questions about the family businesses, and they had all kinds of questions. What's amazing about this family is they had a book that was printed out for them massive book, and it was beautiful. And I read it before I came into this interview, so I knew the background, and I sculpted a lot of the questions from it. But I couldn't believe there was a couple of them who had flipped through it, but almost all of the grandchildren had not even read their family legacy book that was printed for them. But what I realized that was so special, especially in the third session where he for 2 hours he went around the circle and he spoke into each of his grandchildren saying, I see this in you. And this is how, these are your strengths. And and he turned to another person, and when you are looking for a spouse, look for this. And he just was passing on his wisdom and things that he had wanted to say and be intentional with them, but didn't have to be able to do this with all of them in the room at once. And he took his time doing it. It was such a gift. If I had, a time like that with my own grandfather,
Right.
speaking into me, I don't know what I would do with myself, but it was a holy moment. And it made me excited about the work that I do.
Yeah,
But
that's very
it's
Old Testament. That's very Old Testament, right? The patriarch speaking into a blessing into the lives of children and grandchildren, and
absolutely.
how it's so important to think about what you're saying, because it can turn out to be actually prophetic as it galvanizes into the heart and soul of the receiver. Just as you say, holy moment. What a marvelous thing. And the other thing I like what you said is that everybody has a story, and you might not think you do. Oh, you've got a story. How do you, for somebody that is, hey, I want to do something significant, but oftentimes I don't feel like I've done much. How do you pull out their story from them, John? Do you have any approaches to do
Well,
that?
just being insatiably curious. I've never not been fascinated talking to somebody and hearing their story and hearing them open up. But sometimes, some people they're an open book, and then some people don't know that they haven't processed their own story.
Yeah.
Sometimes on the front end, it's good to get them thinking about what are the moments in life that have shaped you? What are the experiences you have had that are the peaks and the valleys? What is the house that built you? You're more than your vocation. You're more than your assets. You've lived through life and you've made a lot of decisions. And those decisions, good and bad, have brought about who you are and the things that you feel and why you feel them and why you feel the conviction around those things. So, I mean, that's people's journey. And yeah, there's just great value there.
Yeah, there's a lot more wisdom in the room than you think there might be. And I think it's just a wonderful way to pry open some of that wisdom by having your grandchildren go around the room and ask you questions. I mean, that's almost not fair. What a magical moment if that approach is. I would be thinking if you could replicate that, that'd be really a good default way to begin if you wanted to do something like this.
What's
Love
interesting
it.
is I never even met the G3s who hired me. I was put in contact with the family office, but multiple times before I ever got into the room with the grandchildren and the grandfather, I got on Zooms and got to know the grandchildren and kind of walked them through some of the format, how I was going to capture. And that's a lot of microphones to put on people because
Yeah.
you definitely want to have proper audio and capture it, do it right. But it was interesting to me that it was a gift to their grandfather. It was a gift to the father, and it was a gift also to the grandchildren. But the G generation, didn't even want it to be seen, and I thought that was a really unique way because they were intentionally fostering a connection between the grandchildren and the grandfather, and it was beautiful.
The involvement or the ownership. You talked about the coffee table book, which is still a great idea. That's a wonderful idea. But the grandchildren were really like tripping over it, leafing through it as much as they may have hoped. But when a grandchild asks a question or two, or when a grandchild receives a blessing or an encouragement, Now they have ownership. They're involved. And all of a sudden, this becomes a really valuable thing for them to listen to. That's almost it's almost sneaky, John. I like that. That's fabulous.
What putting it in film form does is it makes something that can be like a book, and to the younger generation can be very overwhelming. But what it does is it takes all the things that matter, the stories and his desire to pass his wisdom on, and even, you know, knowledge about the family businesses, which a lot of them had a lot of questions because it's not assumed that even knowledge about the family business is being passed on. Those things were put in a package that was easily digestible by the younger generation. It was played at his 90th birthday party, and obviously the whole family, but extended family and friends, many who wouldn't take the time to read that book. And it was a beautiful book, really, really well done, and a real treasure. But many who wouldn't take the time to go through that all got to experience the wealth, the internal wealth and beauty of this man, and what he leaving them. So they celebrated him in a beautiful way. I think more families would greatly benefit from investing in, especially because the person who had asked me for years, John, you need to get into legacy work. John, you need to get into legacy work. At some point, and you can tell my head's a little thick, at some point it clicked on me. I was like, do you want a legacy piece? And he immediately was like, yes, I absolutely want a legacy piece.
There you
And
go. Can I practice on you?
and
Yeah.
well, and I was so excited, and it was so sad. Almost immediately, he had battled cancer before, but he had a reoccurring bout that came about, and when we had scheduled to, capture his story, he was too weak, and
Okay.
I lament not being quicker to realize what he was really asking
Oh, my
for.
goodness.
But in a way, I feel like what I'm doing now is really honoring.
Right.
He was a
Right.
client, but he became a dear friend, and I love that I get to do this type of work now, and I really credit him with the impetus to even consider it.
So imagine, right, you're one of these grandchildren that have a copy of this story, this artful story, and how you can, re-listen to this throughout the years. But imagine sharing it with your children. That 35 years ago, this is what my grandparent told the family, or my great-grandparent, and what he told me. And to share that. And now you really are passing down the baton from generation to generation of, family legacy and process and history. I just think that's incredibly powerful. Again, how could you put a price tag on that? I don't think you could. I would pay a lot of money to have something my great grandparents said to me. I don't
Yeah.
have it. I can't get it.
Yeah.
Wow. So cool.
And you assume that you can always do it, but capturing this man, I keep going back to this family, but it was so precious because he was his church's choir leader. And so throughout, the interviews, he's going in and out of song. And as beautiful as the book is, it can't capture the essence of his voice and the sound of his voice and his image and likeness in a way that, again, thinking back to my friend who encouraged me to get into this line of work, you never know how long you have. And I think for the older generations, if you can capture it while they're still alive, you capture something special. It's special also if you're just telling their story of somebody who has passed, but it's not the same as hearing it from their own voice. So I don't know. There's a sense of urgency that I had because I missed doing this for a dear friend.
Yeah, I can see that set you on a mission. This is more than a job. This is a work and a calling, and that's really neat. And use the word holy a couple of times, and that's exactly what I was thinking about. These are holy moments for families, no matter your theology. They're holy moments. Could I ask this too? Now, if somebody was to pick up the phone and to have a conversation with you and ask, hey, how does your process work? What is typically the process timeline, and how you capture this for families?
Well, so in the discovery process, there's a lot of questions because there are a lot of different reasons why people want to capture legacy work, and some of it actually there are times when um, I was contacted once by a family office that needed needed a legacy piece done. It had some legal ramifications as well. They're wanting to capture the story, but they're also wanting to capture testimony that can be used for the estate and for decisions that had been made and
Mm-hmm.
to solidify those kinds of decisions. So there's a lot of different reasons. Sometimes there's businesses that are being passed on. So, in this discovery phase, there's a lot of different reasons why somebody would want to do a legacy piece.
Yeah.
And so there's the process of kind of going through, well, what's the intent? What's the agenda? Now let's think about the research that's needed for executing that. And let's think about now what would be the best setting to capture this in. And then sometimes you're dealing with a lot of different schedules. And sometimes you're dealing with a lot of different voices and contributors that are going to go into a legacy piece. So there's a lot of coordination on the front end that gets sorted out, and then a plan is put into place uh, based on what the needs are.
Mm-hmm.
For years I did marketing and branding films, and a lot of those pieces were, I mean, all the way from a 15-second, piece to most of them were 2 to 3 minutes
Mm-hmm.
or a 30-second spot. But these legacy pieces sometimes there's a lot of information that needs to be sorted through. Oftentimes that means there's multiple interviews that need to take place. But the idea is just to start the conversation. And from that, we kind of map out what type of commission. Is this going to be a shorter, 3-month commission, or a 6-month, or is this a, 18 to a 2-year process?
Right. So if you have a large and maybe complicated extended family that's spread to the wind, and you want to create something that's going to capture all of their attentions, which might involve a lot of their involvement with it, I was curious to think about this then. If somebody is in, Sweden, and you sure would like to get some testimony on this one story that they remembered their grandfather experienced with them, can they do it remotely? Is it good enough quality where they don't have to fly in and see you? You have to fly in to see them. How does that work?
There are ways to really democratize. I mean, honestly, what I would encourage people to do is, even if you're a family that's not able to afford the full price tag of a 2-year project, the greatest value is actually just it's not in the artistry. I I got niched into doing really kind of beautiful work for high-end luxury brands, and that was a long part of my career. So the aesthetic is important to me, but um, the heart of this, the aesthetic is really just icing, you know,
Hmm.
on the top.
Mm-hmm.
It's not mandatory. The heart is really in the interview, really the questions and the answers that come out when when you start intentionally saying, I'm going to do a legacy piece, capturing it on a phone, capturing it even with a voice memo. I mean, this is something. If somebody's is you don't know how much time they have. You don't have, it doesn't have to be a Hollywood production. It really is important just to capture in whatever way you can. Now, there are I've hired remote crews before.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then I've also coached people through filming things on their iPhone, and both are valid. But the most important thing is just do it. Even if you're not hiring, a legacy filmmaker like myself or somebody else, absolutely, it has so much value, and you can capture it on your phone. And that, some people want to pay extra to make it look beautiful, but it won't make it any less special to capture
Mm-hmm.
it on your phone. So I want to say that, the hiring me is a luxury to have it, edited and look a certain way, but it's not what gives it its value or its heartbeat. What gives it its value is the content and the story, and that can be captured for free.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Well, John, as we come to a close here, I mean, I've peppered you with a lot of questions, and I think that this is a really good foundation as to what you're doing and the value of what you're doing and what folks could benefit as from it. Anything else that we might want to have covered that I forgot to ask you? Anything like in the top of mind that would say, "Hey, let's talk about this for a few minutes"?
Oh, I had thoughts earlier, but I'm not capturing them right now.
Well, there you go. That's, I know the problem. I know the problem. Again, I think our emphasis on family ethos, family spirit, our de-emphasis many a times on financial capital, challenging people, speaking directly to them about the value of family capital being far greater than financial capital. And if we believe that to be true, then, is our time and our treasure, our efforts, does it reflect that? These are very personal, powerful questions that at Navigating Abundance, we actually are not too afraid to ask. And so this is when, again, what you're doing is really great for, again, following the line of thinking that we are, and the value of history, story, roots, and values being passed down, especially in the voice of the patriarch or matriarch, it's just hard to replicate that. That's really great stuff. So, John, if someone wanted to kick your tires a little bit more, I mean, we're going to put your website up and whatnot, and some contact information. We can certainly do that. But what should they be thinking about as they have a phone call conversation with you? What are some things that they should be prepared for you to be asking, I guess, when they call?
Well, I mean, the main question is why? Why is this important to you? Why is it important for you to capture this story? Because it's important for them to answer that question. It's important for them to know why it is important, and yeah, for them to kind of know the heart and the intention behind it. One of the stories that comes to mind, just even as I think, why is this important? This man who was surrounded by his grandchildren was telling a story about a widow who lived across the street from him when he was a kid. And he said, every night for dinner, we knew that we couldn't sit down and eat the meal that was prepared for us and sitting in front of us until we took a plate of food across the street and gave dinner to this neighbor of ours. And there was something about him sharing, this is where I came from. This was who my mother was, who your great grandmother was. This is what lives inside of you. Or telling them, they had all kinds of questions about where they're giving their money charitably, and the philanthropy side of the family business. They had a lot of new ideas, and they had a lot of questions as to, well, tell us more about, why we're giving to this. These are the things that are connecting these generations, but it's also the things that this next generation's thinking about and considering, and it's what's making their heartbeat and tick. And so these are I feel like I'm rambling now, but answering the question, why is this important? Because there's a lot of layers to it. And I'm assuming that, it's this type of legacy piece. It may have nothing to do with passing on family wisdom. It may have everything to do with logistically transitioning, ownership,
Right.
from one generation to another. And there's a lot of logistics, and there's a lot of legal things that need to be addressed and documented and archived, and testimonies. So the big
Yeah.
question is why? Why is
Yeah.
it important? And what are we?
Yeah. Love that. Love that. Well, John Moessner from Film Indelible, This has been great. Thank you for spending some time with us. We wish you Godspeed on your work. I know it's a valuable thing, and I think that even you don't realize how valuable it will be for the next several hundred years. This stuff just tends to be far greater than us. Holy moments is, I think, a great way to say it. And this is just really, really fun work. It makes me wish I would have majored in something different in college. But anyway, yeah, thank you so much. And folks, we encourage you to connect with John and his group and to learn more about what Film Indelible might do for you, or they might coach you. Hey, maybe you should go a little different direction. I'm sure their hearts are full to just be a blessing to you, just be an encouragement to you. This is Chris Tanke with Navigating Abundance, reminding you once again, as always, your family is worth it.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Navigating Abundance. If you found this information useful or helpful in any way, let us know in the comments section below. If you'd like to see more content like this and follow our podcast, you can find us on all major podcast platforms. If you're interested in working with today's guests, you can find their information in the description of this podcast. If you'd like to know more about Navigating Abundance and how we may help you, or find more resources related to what we do, you can find those at navigatingabundance.com.